Hello, welcome back to Four Fives Design. My name's Jay and today I'm going to show you how to make a poinsettia out of coffee filters. For this you're going to need the following items. Firstly, your coffee filters, then gel icing colour or food colouring, but I particularly like these gel icing colours. These are from Wilton and you're going to need red, green and brown. You're then going to need some paper or card to make yourself a template for these poinsettia leaves. You're going to need some floral or floristry wire, a little bundle of them here, and the floral tape that you'll wrap around them, scissors, paintbrush, and of course you'll need some sort of glue. And the final thing you'll need are these yellow beads. These are Trimmets yellow beads, but whatever make you can get hold of. It's also handy to have a little box to pop your completed leaves in before you assemble the poinsettia, because you will need a lot of these for one of these poinsettia flower heads, however you would call them. All of these, both the red and the green, are both counted as leaves. The red ones are bracts, the others are leaves, but they're basically all leaves. But for the purpose of this video, I'm going to call the red ones the petals and the green one the leaves, just to avoid confusion. But for one of these completed flower heads, you're going to need at least 5 green leaves and at least 7 red petals in different sizes, as well as your little Trimmets beads. I've used 5 beads for this poinsettia head. So this video is going to be how to complete this one flower head, and then I'll do a separate video on how to assemble these into the traditional poinsettia plant that you would then put into a pot ready to add to your Christmas decor. These are fantastic for making into wreaths, garlands, any other decoration that you would want for the holiday season. Okay, so let's get started. The first thing I would advise you to do is to have a good look at pictures of poinsettias. Better still, find the real thing. Being as it's August and I live in England, there's no way I can get hold of a real life poinsettia just at this time of the year. So I've spent time looking at lots of videos and images on the internet, and it looks to me as though to make the poinsettia flower head, if we call it that, you need a leaf shape like that, and then for the red section, remember they're all leaves, but for the red section, which I'll call petals for the sake of this video, there's 3 different sizes and slightly different shapes. There's these smaller ones, and then 2 that are similar size but slightly different shape. That seems to be reflected in all the videos, the pictures that I can see, that those red coloured bracts or leaves or petals as we will call them are different sizes and slightly different shapes. So for the purpose of this, I've cut out my templates. I've just drawn them freehand based on what I've seen and come up with these 3 different shapes for the petals and a normal traditional leaf shape for the poinsettia leaf. What I'm going to try and do, if I can, is to put a photograph of this attached to the video. If I can get it in the description, if I can work out how to do that, I will do, so that you can print that off and use this as your own template. But honestly, I am no artist, and I was able to draw these approximately close enough to the real life poinsettia leaves and petals to get the desired effect. So you could always have a go. So using that template, it's nothing more elaborate than to place those templates, once you've cut them out, onto your coffee filters. And I tend to do one at a time because I find it easier to cut through a coffee filter one at a time. And dependent on the size that you have, so for these little ones, you'll probably get away with folding those down to quite a small amount. Let's have a look. Maybe not, maybe so. Yep. Whatever the size is that you end up with, draw around with a pencil and snip those out and keep them to one side, and do the same for the other sizes, for those 3 different red ones, and the same for the larger one. It might be when you get to the larger one that you'll need to perhaps fold this into thirds so that you can cut out a few. But basically you get the idea. What you want is lots and lots of these different sizes for the red leaves, and lots and lots of poinsettia leaves that we're going to colour next. For each of these individual leaves or flowers, you need 2 of these cut out coffee filters, so that's why you need lots of them. So get cutting, and I'll see you back here ready to colour them. So I've been busy doing a lot of cutting out, as you can see, and I've got all my coffee filter leaves and petals laid up, ready to do the next step, which is colouring them in. So on this sheet here in front of you, I've used non-stick baking parchment to place enough of these coffee filter leaves or sepals to make 1 poinsettia. So all these here, on this side here, this section are going to be coloured green to make the leaves. The others are 3 different shapes of leaves, or petals as we'll call them, that we're going to paint red to make that red bracts or leaves or petals of the poinsettia. So you can see how many you need to make 1 of these here. 1 of those, you need all of these here. So we've got 3 of these smaller ones. You need 2 of those for each one of those. But we need 3 of those for that flower head. And then we need 7, I think I've done 8 here just to be on the safe side, 7 other red leaves, and then 5 green leaves. So we just need to start to colour these now. For my colouring station, I've got my 3 gel colours. I've got the red, where's the colour? The red, green and brown. I've got some water. I've got a little bit of Mod Podge, and I'll tell you why in a minute. Essential piece of equipment, a bit of kitchen paper, because you will get covered in this gel dye no matter what. So I've got that kitchen paper. I've got a knife that I'm going to use just to get the gel out, a paintbrush to paint it on, excuse me, and this is an egg tray from my fridge that I don't use. An ice cube tray would be perfect for this as well. So, excuse me, I'm going to start with the red, and I'm going to take a blob of that red, and add a little bit of water. So I'm not wasting the dye. I'm going to use the edge of my knife, and I'm just going to dissolve that gel icing colour in the water. Just stir it around for a little bit. And you can use that just as it is, and we'll see if there is a real difference between this and if you add a bit of PVA glue, craft glue, Mod Podge, whatever you're using. I'll show you what I mean. We want a nice deep red, so you want quite a bit of pigment in this, so that's why we don't want to add a lot of water to it. And we want to make sure that's fully dissolved. Now, I'll show you just with this one here. If I just add, that's just water added to that gel, and you can see how quickly that coffee filter absorbs that dye, which is fantastic. It's just what we want. That lovely red colour, nice and bright and Christmassy. If you add a little tidge of Mod Podge or whatever glue, just going to add a bit of that to it. It helps to set that colour so that it doesn't run as much as that. So I'm just going to stir that in and see if we can tell the difference between the two. It should help it to retain that gorgeous red colour. I'll clean my brush. So we'll start with a clean brush so you've got a good comparison. So even though I've only added a little bit, the more Mod Podge you add, the less it will run. It's more like painting it on rather than that dye being absorbed. Yeah, I like that. That's one. Can you see the difference between the two colours? I haven't added any more pigment. Can you see? This one is far deeper red, a more true red than the other one. And that's just by adding that little bit of Mod Podge to it. So I'm going to continue to do these. I'm going to colour all those red with my Mod Podge in, and I'll see you back here for the leaves. So I've done all the red, and you can see from here I've still got a little bit of that red colouring left from that little tiny bit that we did. And I've been able to do all of those petals. I've done the same process for the leaves. I've probably added a little bit more Mod Podge to the colour for these leaves, so you can see particularly on these it is more like painting the dye on, which is not a problem, whichever way you do it, but this probably will give you the deepest colour and the one that's closest to the colour on your little pot if you add that Mod Podge. If you don't, depending on how much water you add, you can add lots of different colours. It just depends on what you want. What I found is I brought myself a pack of these colours, again on Amazon. I think there's 8 colours here. Fantastic variety, everything that you should need. I did buy myself an addition. This comes with leaf green. I did buy myself 2 additional greens, and the one I'm using for these poinsettia is called Kelly green because it's a bit darker, and I also brought a moss green which is more earthy, and I brought this brown as well, and that's what I'm going to use next for both the leaves and the petals. This time I'm not using the Mod Podge. I've just put some of that brown colour with water in my little egg container. I'll clean my brush out. My neighbour's just cutting his hedge, so you might be able to hear that. I'll see if I can edit it out. It just depends on how long he's going to be doing that for. I'm starting with a clean brush. I'll just move you up a little bit. Because what I'm going to be doing here is adding some definition to these leaves. If you look at this one here, the colours look slightly different to what I've just done, and that's because I've added this brown colouring just very finely around the edge of both the red leaves and the green leaves. Because if you look at pictures of poinsettias, that's just what happens. And for this, I haven't added the Mod Podge because I do want the colour to be absorbed by the coffee filter. Now, I'm not doing this in a particularly artistic way. I'm just grabbed a little bit of that brown colouring and I'm just going right around the very edges of these. It looks a bit dramatic, but honestly, the colours will just blend together. I'm doing them around all of the shapes that I've cut out and coloured, whether it's red or green, they're all getting the same treatment. Just that tiny little bit of colouring around the edge and letting it absorb in. Doing the same with the leaves. You probably won't see this as dramatically on the leaves, but it's the same thing. It gives a bit of shading, I suppose, as well as giving it that realistic look. And I'm just going to go around all of those in the same manner. What I'm going to be doing with, I think, with these here, I'm going to wash my brush out and I'm just going to smudge that out from the centre outwards, because it was going a little bit, it was following the lines of the creases, which I didn't particularly want, and that one's doing the same. So we're after a dirty red rather than a plain bright red for your poinsettias. So I'm going to continue to do that for all of these, adding a little bit of definition and extra colour and shading to get that realistic poinsettia look. I've left these overnight, and once they dry, it's just a matter of carefully peeling them off the parchment. And stacking them up. Remember, you need 2 of those to make 1 leaf. I tend to need to get a little production line going. So I'm just going to peel these off and place them there ready for the next stage, which is gluing the leaves together. I've noticed that you can now get a Mod Podge that's suitable for external use. So I think that's going to be interesting to try. I might try doing these with that external Mod Podge and testing out to see whether they would make, you could make an external wreath for your front door in the same way, but having the protection of that external Mod Podge. So I'll try that and I'll let you know how I go on. I don't know whether you can see up close. These are just slightly different shapes. This one here has got a more raggedy edge and a little bit fatter than that one. So that's why I'm trying to keep them like for like so that I can stick the right shapes together. With these little ones, I've used 2 or 3 of these red leaves for each poinsettia, except because I want to do an arrangement with a whole bunch of them, I've made some using more of these, perhaps 4 or 5 or even 6 of them, so you get a slightly smaller flower head. Because in a real bunch of flowers, in a real arrangement of poinsettia, there will be different sizes. So you will cut more of these, so you will get to use them. So once I've peeled them off, we need a fresh sheet of painting parchment. So that we can begin to stick these together. Now what I've got here is a bunch of florist wire, stub wire. This is very, very thin, so it's probably about 6, 7 inches long, and very thin wire. And because it's very thin, and because I wanted to make it look sort of quite authentic, I've wrapped each one in some brown stem tape. And for this, I've cut a strip of stem tape, and because this wire is so thin, it's easier to cut that stem tape in half in order to wrap it around this wire. So if you take your wire, place it at the end, and here you'll find your own action on how to do this. I'm right-handed, but I just wrap that first bit round first and then pinch it together, then hold that top end, and with my right hand I'm holding and stretching that stem tape. With my left I'm twizzling the wire. You'll find your own way to do this. I think I'm probably doing it the wrong way around, but this is the way that works best for me. And keep twizzling, pulling on the tape, twizzling your wire until it's covered. Now I am thinking of looking to see if we can get some brown stem tape, get some brown wire that's this thin, or to look for some brown wire that's just slightly thicker than this stub wire, and then you won't have to do that step of covering it. But I wanted something that was a little bit thicker than that, but not too much thicker, to form the rib of the leaves. So I've now got a little batch of those. I've got a little batch of my leaves in different sizes. So now we're going to stick those together. I've got my Mod Podge on a little tray. I've got my paintbrush. These are lovely and soft. I use them for the dye and for the glue. And we're going to take one leaf, apply that glue. This is Mod Podge, you can use PVA glue. The Mod Podge I like the idea of because it's also a sealant as well as an adhesive. You're then going to place our stub wire right down the centre, press it in firmly and apply a little bit more Mod Podge at the end. When I've made hydrangea leaves, I've tended to use hot glue to seal that base, but I've found when I've been doing these leaves, it's been sufficient to use the Mod Podge. I'm then going to place that top on and exaggerate that. I don't know if you can see in this light, I'm exaggerating that central vein. And then apply your Mod Podge over the top. So this will do two things. It will, one, stick the two pieces together, and two, seal in that central stem, which one creates the stem and two creates the vein. And also with this Mod Podge being a sealant, it will seal that surface. So I was thinking of trying this with the Mod Podge that you can use for external use, to see if you could then create some poinsettia to use in a wreath for the outside of your home at Christmas. So basically that's it. Continue in that manner, sticking together all of the green leaves, all of the red leaves, and leave them until they dry. And then we'll be ready to assemble. So now we're ready to assemble the poinsettia. I'm so glad I did my production line. I got lots of red and green leaves ready in my box. That's going to help so much at this stage. And I've also set out everything that I need for this next stage. So I've got 5 leaves. I've got 2 of these smaller red leaves. And I've got another one in reserve, but I'm just going to show you something with that first. And I've then got 5 of the other red leaves, 4, 5, 7 in fact. 3 that's going to be for the first layer, and 4 for the back layer. And again, a bit like having these 2 little ones here, I've got an extra leaf in reserve. Perhaps hear my dog barking in the background. And I've got these 2 here because I just want to show you before you begin. Once you've glued your leaves together, you may want to do a little bit of prep before you assemble. 2 examples here. Firstly, this one here, where it was stuck to the parchment paper, although it's non-stick, the top bit of it did come off a little bit. But I'm not going to throw that away, I'm not going to waste it, because what you can do, bearing in mind that we're looking for something that's authentic, so we don't want everything to be exactly the same, I'm still going to use that, and I'm going to create a new little pointy bit by just trimming that off a little bit. So instead of throwing it away, I've just created a new little leaf, and that'll be something that adds a bit of character and shape. You can also trim these where you've got 2 pieces of your petal stuck together and they're not exactly the same shape or size. So you've got that little flap over the side. Don't throw them away, just give them a trim. The main thing is that you get that lovely little elegant point at the end, which differentiates this leaf on the poinsettia to perhaps other leaves. Thing just to watch here is when you're doing this, just make sure that you've still got this edgy sealed. You might find that by cutting out there you've broken the seal that you've made with your adhesive. If so, you might wish to go and apply another layer of adhesive to that. Otherwise, we're now ready to go. So we've got three of the smaller leaves, four to form the next layer, and 4 for the back. I might not need all these. I'm just going to see how I go. Just have a look at there so you can see. We will need at least 2 of these. It's going to, just to recap, we're going to do 3 layers. The first layer will need 2 of these. The next layer will need at least 3. And the final layer will need at least 4. I've included an extra small one and an extra one of the larger leaves for you to put in where you think is best. Now, I can't give you any direction on that other than this is where your personalisation comes in, your artistry. What we're going to do is to build that flower head up like you would if you were doing a handheld bouquet. I'm not a florist, never have been, but I've watched with fascination while florists do a handheld bouquet where you take a middle section of flowers and then add to them whilst holding them still with one hand. And that's the general principle that we're going to do here. But the very first thing that we do before we start to add those is to create the centre, those little berries in the centre. I mentioned I've used trimmets. They're probably not exactly as I would want, if I'm honest. I think if you'd got little yellow wooden beads, they might be better, but they're not so bad. I'm quite happy with the effect. I just might consider trying something else. And all I've done so far, I've got 4 already done, is to thread a piece of floristry wire through and then twisted it so that that little bead stays at the top. So we've just got 1 more to do, because you want 5 of these to form that central collection. I'm just threading that floristry wire through, bend it over into a hairpin shape, hold it as tight as you can at the base, and then wrap that round just so that that holds it in place. If it doesn't, just twist it. There's no sophisticated way of doing it. You're just trying to make sure that that wire holds that little bead in place. And you've then got 5 in the centre. As with anything to do with nature, odd numbers are a better collection, so you could probably get away with 3 of these. If you want to go mad, you could do 7. Either way, you want an odd number of these little berries to form that centre. And just for ease, I'm going to put, if I can find the end of this. Why can you never find the end of your stem tape when you want to? Just have a look. I think that's where it is. I'm just going to apply a little bit of stem tape just to hold that together, just so I don't have to worry about it. And now we're going to start to assemble that poinsettia head. So I'm going to take 2 of my red leaves, the smallest ones, and put those first. This is the first layer. And you'll see what I mean by layer as we start to build them up. And I'm just placing them there either side. I want them quite close to the top because I want to, hide the stem, have those little wire stems. And I'm going to hold those in place with the flower, with the stem tape. So we've got that first layer in place. I'm going to save this one in reserve because I might want to use that in the next layer. But the next layer I'm going to start to build up and add. Initially, I'm going to put the first 2 opposite those middle 2. And I'm going to keep adding. So that's the 3rd one on this second row. I'm now going to add that little one, that 3rd little one, just to give it a bit of a different feeling, a different look. I'm going to move those around till I've got them where I want them. There. And then seal that with the stem tape. So as I'm adding these leaves, I'm just holding them in place with the stem tape. And that's looking quite good so far. Looking a bit empty down here, I would say. So when we come to the 3rd layer, I'm going to add those to that area. There's one. As you can see, I'm just gradually building this shape up till I get something that looks like a poinsettia and something that I'm happy with. I think I've just dropped one there. It's definitely easier if you just capture the stem of it with your floral tape. And I think probably I might just add one more. You can add as many of these as you like till you get the look that you think is best. Just means that you end up making more of them. So underneath, I don't know if you can see there, they're all at the same level, pinched together with that stem tape. And that's looking, I think, pretty good, like a poinsettia. So I'm going to add the green now. Now, a couple of things here. Firstly, with this one that I've made already, I just carried on almost as though I was adding the red and put the leaves quite close to, the green leaves close to the red. And I think that's great if you're going to be using these in a wreath or a garland. If you're going to use them to make an imitation of a poinsettia plant that you can put in your hallway in a pot, then looking at pictures of poinsettias, as I've had to do because I haven't got any real life ones available, then it looks to me as though the green are just slightly lower down the flower stem. So for this one, I'm going to do that. So I'm leaving just a slight gap, as you can see there, before I'm starting to put the green on, because I want to have a go at making a poinsettia that looks like the ones that you can buy at Christmas that you use for home decor. that always start to wilt and lose their leaves just about after Christmas Day. Things normally start to go wrong. I'm hoping then that these can last all through the holiday season and beyond. So a bit like I did with the red ones, I'm just adding these leaves one at a time until I get the shape that I like. But they are a little bit further down the stem than the very first one that I did. I'm going to see how this goes. This is the first time I've had a go at making poinsettias, so I will experiment further till I get what I need. So I don't know if you can see there's a little gap between the green layer and the red layer. From the top it still looks pretty good, it looks like a poinsettia, but with this one there is no gap there, but that's great for wreaths and decor. I think once I've made a few of these and they're attached to a stem and placed in a pot, you're not going to know the difference between a real poinsettia and these coffee filter ones. So there we have it. I'm going to carry on now and make lots of these, and I'll show you in my other video how to assemble these into a pot. But for now you've got the idea of how to make poinsettias out of coffee filters for your home decor.